The Democratic National Convention wrapped here in Chicago on Friday with Kamala Harris making history as the first woman of color to accept the presidential nomination of a major party ticket.
And I want you to know, I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self.
The week saw a number of star-studded performances from performers like Patti LaBelle and John Legend, as well as celebrity appearances from Oprah Winfrey and political heavy hitters including Barack and Michelle Obama, as well as Bill and Hillary Clinton. The Hill's Michael Schnell caught up with Scott Tranter, the director of data science from Decision Desk HQ, and went on the record.
Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to get right into it. Kamala Harris just made history as the first woman of color to accept a presidential nomination. What are your biggest takeaways from her big speech tonight?
Biggest takeaways is, look, the energy in the room and what she brought, right? This was a way different than what we saw Joe Biden's speech on Monday, which was well received, but there was a lot more energy here. She had a much more forward-looking speech. She didn't touch a lot on policy, but generally speaking, people don't in these speeches. She was trying to introduce herself, her vision, her background, what makes her her for this audience. And, you know, if the ratings are anything like the past few nights, there are going to be 20, 30 million people who watch this.
And Scott, throughout the week, hope was a driving message that we saw in this convention with different speeches, different videos. Is that resonating with voters? Because there's been some question about the democracy argument resonating with voters. We know that abortion and women's reproductive rights is potent among the Democratic base. But what about hope? What's the numbers coming back for this hope message?
Well, no, it's interesting. It's kind of funny, right? The campaign season for most voters hasn't even started yet. I feel like, Michael, you and I have been talking about this for almost a year now, but most voters aren't going to really tune in for another 10 days. And so we're going to see what those numbers come out with in terms of how they receive her message. But what I will say is what voters have been thinking the last 5-6 months, looking at both candidates, for the majority of it, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, they were looking for a candidate to bring them a forward-looking, hope-based message. And we're going to see if those poll numbers continue to shift towards her, because that's the message she brought tonight.
It was an A-list of speakers this week, Democratic heavy hitters like the Obamas, the Clintons, stars like Kerry Washington. We saw Pink perform. How much is their support? How important is that for Harris in the lead up to November? We know that Obama, for example, both of the Obamas are very popular within the Democratic base. Is the Hollywood effect really effective for the Harris campaign? What are these surrogates doing for the campaign?
Well, look, they get visibility among average voters because guess what? Average voters, they care about celebrities. They care about what these singers, these actors, these sports figures, what they do. That's basically what people watch every day. And so this is a good juxtaposition for the Democrats. The last convention I was at like this was 2008. And Barack Obama brought this kind of star power. This is not something we've seen at a Democratic convention or a Republican convention probably since then. And it turned out well for Barack Obama in 2008. This is certainly some good momentum for her coming out of this convention week.
And let's talk about now the past 5 weeks, because they have been a wild ride for voters across the country, but especially for Kamala Harris. Since taking over the Democratic ticket, we've seen her polls improve, and we're just now less than 90 days away to the presidential election. Decision Desk HQ is forecasting that Vice President Harris is leading Trump by almost 3% nationwide. Are we going to see major changes in the polls going forward, or has the vice president proven that her support is rock steady? I know I've spoken to a number of House Republicans who have said this is a honeymoon period and that Democrats are on a sugar rush, and that after we get past Memorial Day, things are going to calm down. After we get past Labor Day, Memorial Day, things are going to calm down a little bit.
Yeah, no, look, about 7-8 weeks ago when you threw that graphic up after that first debate when we talked about it was Donald Trump ahead. Now, wasn't ahead by a lot, 2 or 3 points. She's now ahead 2 or 3 points. As you point out, it could be a honeymoon, but this is going to sound pretty crazy. First people get to vote in North Carolina in less than 2 weeks. So, you know, if the honeymoon period sticks around any longer, votes are going to come in while she's ahead. And I think that's what the Donald Trump campaign's worried about, is they need to stem this momentum and get the polls back in their favor, because voters are going to go to the polls pretty soon.
Scott, I was excited when I saw that we had you as a guest tonight because I wanted to ask you about the other side of the aisle, the Republican Party. There's speculation that RFK Jr. will be suspending his campaign tomorrow and endorsing Trump. RFK Jr. is giving a speech on the path forward for his campaign, and Trump said he'll have a special guest at his rally. They're going to be in the same state tomorrow. How significant would RFK Jr. endorsement for Trump be for his campaign? We've seen that these polls are extremely close, and RFK Jr. is polling pretty low, but could that small contingent, if they ultimately do follow his lead and go to Trump, I mean, how significant are we talking here?
Pretty significant. I'll say, look, in the last 20 minutes, we just confirmed this on our side, RFK Jr.'s petitioned to have his name removed from the ballot in Arizona. So that gives you a little foresight into what we think he's going to announce tomorrow. Now, the thought is he endorses Donald Trump, and that would make sense because if he comes off the ballot, it appears that most of his supporters go to Donald Trump to the tune of 1 or 2% nationally and 1 or 2% in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, 1 or 2% doesn't seem like a lot. But again, this race is on the margins. This race is going to be determined by 1 or 2 points. So it'll be pretty significant, the fact that if he actually drops out tomorrow and if he actually endorses Donald Trump, it'll be a boost to the Trump campaign.
70-something days, a lot can happen, but we are certainly getting closer and closer. Scott Tranter from Decision Desk HQ, thank you so much for joining us.